Today, we're going to be learning about the Dead Space franchise, which is a franchise that I've heard a lot of really good things about, but I have never actually played it before, which is kind of surprising considering how much of a fan I am of both sci-fi and horror. I don't really know why. I guess I just never owned the right consoles. Anyways, as per usual, please make sure to go and support Mandalore. The link to the OG video is at the very top of the description, as always. All very good noises. Soundscape quite reminiscent of what we recently just checked out, being System Shock. Looking Glass Studio were just really good at creating such immersive atmospheres using their audio engineering.
Halloween is right around the corner, but instead of checking out an indie horror title like I did last year, I thought this year I'd look at a more mainstream one. My first encounter with Dead Space was the commercial for it. I knew nothing about it, but man, did it draw me right in.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I
A classic for horror.
you are.
Take something innocent that people are familiar with and twist that. I know there's a ton of people out there who get immensely spooked out by like children laughing. To be perfectly honest with you guys though, back as a kid, I hated horror. Like, it scared the shit out of me. I hated everything about it. I would refuse to watch anything about it. And I don't really know at what point that started shifting. I don't know what the catalyst even was, but then I discovered how cool it was. And instead of being scared of it and being having a ton of sleepless nights, I found enjoyment from it. It's weird.
Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky.
It would just be a long shot of a spaceship area and then bam, cut to violence. I was really curious, and I ended up buying it not long after that. So what's this all about, and how does it hold up 9 years later? To start with the how does it hold up part, I need to talk about the PC port. Unfortunately, this game is possessed by the devil. Luckily, I have a few tricks to exorcise him. Dead Space is a console port, and it has a lot of frame rate specific issues. The input time and the speed of mouse movement are affected by the frame rate, so your movement can feel different depending on the room you're in. To make matters worse, the better the game is running, the more physics will start to break. The physics issue can kind of be solved by using the in-game VSync option, but if you use this, then your game is locked to 30 frames per second and the mouse issue gets even worse. You would think that locking the frame rate would fix that, but it doesn't. But if you leave it off, you might run into even stranger problems, like not being able to go through one of the first doorways in the game. So do you want 30 FPS with awful input lag, or do you just want kind of bad controls with the game going haywire? I'd recommend neither. Download the Dead Space mouse fix and most of your problems go away. Turn off in-game VSync, force it with your driver control panel, then cap it at 60. Now you can aim without feeling like you're in a syrup bottle, and a lot less people will be flying through the floors. Now we can get it.
I'm so glad that there are mods out there that fix all these issues. A lot of people wouldn't be able to experience the Thief or System Shock series, the OGs at least, in the modern era without those mods. Also, for those of you who are a bit more knowledgeable about game development and porting like console exclusives to PC, why is it so hard to do? From what I can imagine, there's a bit of translation that would have to occur because the systems run from different hardware that's coded differently, maybe? But I always find it to be the expectation nowadays that if something is console ported to PC, it's going to suck. Like, for instance, the recent release of Spider-Man 2. We were going to play that. We did play all the previous Spider-Man games. Serby loves the Spider-Man games a lot, but yeah, we're gonna wait on this one because from all the reviews that we've seen, the port is just broken.
Get into the game proper, and I'll take it from the top. You play as a ship engineer named Isaac Clarke in the far future. He's part of a repair team sent to a mining ship. The USG Ishimura was mining a planet when Sunlight stopped communicating with its corporation. So instead of an action hero or a soldier, you're essentially playing as an employee of Space Geek Squad. When things go wrong, you end up stranded on the ship. It turns out they have a bit bigger problems than the broken Wi-Fi. So it's up to you to find out what happened and fix the Ishimura. That's all I'm gonna say about the plot for now. Let's look at the visuals. Dead Space looks incredible. I was actually a bit shocked at how well it held up. This is a port of a 360 game that looks great, so what went right? 2 words: lighting and effects. I love this one bit where you're on a gondola, and the fog moves away and reveals all the enemies. It's just great. Using smoke.
And then you're slowly moving towards them. You have no real control over it, too. Might I add that the monster design is fairly iconic. It's pretty darn great. I haven't played these games, but I know these monsters. I forget what they're called. I just know that you had to cut off their limbs.
Cloak in darkness to hide shortcomings wasn't a new trick, but they mastered it. The few times there are brightly lit areas, you can tell how low res the textures are, but this doesn't happen often. It is a nearly decade-old game, but unless you're staring at walls up close, I think it holds up on a technical level. The attention to detail with the effects is fantastic. Speaking of attention to detail, I have to talk about the art style, especially with how the heads-up display works.
Hold still, Isaac. I'm syncing up everyone's rig with the ship.
That's your health bar filling up. Where other games have some kind of health bar, it's just right there on your body. If you want to read some logs, you just pull it up in front of you. No going into a menu or anything like that.
Is that the crew?
Yeah, just move the camera around. It's really there. How much air is left? The suit will tell you. Where's the objective?
It's pretty
The suit
darn
will tell you.
cool.
If you're really lost, you could always use the 3D map. That's pretty handy. Check out the inventory. Isaac follows along with whatever you look at. How many rounds are left in your weapon? The gun will tell you. This might not seem like a huge deal, but it does wonders for helping to draw you into the setting. All of that video game UI stuff is just a part of their world. I mean, if you're working at a Harris Teeter, you probably don't need to wear a health bar, unless it's, the Sunday rush. But what if you worked here? A lot can go wrong in space.
Oh yeah,
Maybe there's
for
some
sure.
kind of solar
Ooh.
flare or a big rock knocks out the AT&T communication tower. Frank's been awfully still. I hope none of those micrometeorites hit him. Well, now you don't have to wonder. You'll know. You could be sick.
Poor Frank. He didn't deserve this. Removing a lot of the usual UI elements that you'd see in other video games, I think helps out a lot when it comes to building atmosphere, especially in the case of a horror game like this, where you want to be fully immersed in the world in order to truly fear them. I can't recall a video game that we checked out, well, at least recently, that had all these UI elements implemented like this.
Saying that's a stretch because there are better ways to do this, but they sell this to you right from the start. Right when you walk aboard, there's a big display telling you how it's the oldest mining ship in the fleet and how happy the company is you're there. If you've worked in retail or a call center, you already know what's up. Hey, my spacesuit kind of looks like a pair of pajamas with some plating on it. Did they cut some corners? Then you find the limb replacement lab. They want to keep you working. They're growing fetuses to harvest the stem cells for this, I think. Concordance Extraction isn't a good company. You're not getting workplace insurance. You lost it when you dragged that ladder that one time. Details. The ship and everything on it has a really cool industrial look. I've seen Ishimura compared to the Nostromo from Alien, and I agree. There's a lot of inspiration from that there, though Dead Space certainly looks a bit more modern. I was really satisfied with how they presented the ship. It seems practical, like this bathroom. Here's where they grew all their food. Here's where they process asteroids. Here's where the crew blew off some steam. Some all-American zero-G hoopers. In case you couldn't tell
Hell
already,
yeah.
I really like the world of Dead Space. I think it's unique. It's also very well animated. I love how tense Isaac looks, and he's always suspiciously looking around. I can't really say I
I
blame
would
the
be
guy.
too. I guess, right? Especially after this, if we survive this.
The sound of the game definitely matches the visual quality. This goes double for some of the enemies.
Later. What the what? So it's like a bunch of different animated parts just clinging on to each other? And then they just oh god. Ew. But that is some really cool monster design, man. This is such a fantastic idea. Or maybe I'm just a bit more blown away than usual because we've sort of been taking a look at all the stuff from Marathon, from Thief, from System Shock, and so once we get back to the modern era, it's like, whoa! That's amazing! Maybe this is just the norm nowadays for horror games. To be fair, I've only really played Soma, and we were going for a much different kind of horror in that game. What the fuck? This monster reminds me of... oh god, what was that game called? It was another Mandalore review that we watched. It was also sci-fi, and you were also on a ship. And I think that one was pretty heavily inspired by Dead Space. But that game was sort of like an isometric view, I think that's how you would call it. So it gives off a very different feeling from seeing the actual 3D model animated like this. And I mean, this was the original. It came out such a long time ago. I can only imagine how good the remake would be with more modern hardware. A lot of variety too you can see here in the monster design. Spawns the little ones
Just the sound of
too.
Isaac breathing is great for building up tension. The sound changes depending on how much health or air you have.
No! Come on!
Exiting zero gravity.
Oh, jeez. Oh, man.
Exiting
Oh.
vacuum.
Woo! That was way too close. Yep. Cut their limbs.
So all around, this is some top-notch present.
Bro. The pan backwards to yet another monster. That was actually perfect. They're everywhere, man. There's no escaping.
Presentation. There's a bit more to touch on there, but that weaves into the gameplay. So let's get started. Dead Space is a third-person shooter first and foremost, but they changed it up a bit from most shooting games by not having you aim at the center of mass or the head. Instead, you go for the limbs. These are necromorphs, not zombies. To put it simply, every single cell in this thing wants you dead. I'm not sure this is really killing them. The game's pretty adept at teaching you this. All the enemies have very dangling or kind of lanky limbs to aim at. Chopping off the head won't kill them. If anything, it just pisses them off. It's simple to learn through trial and error, but Dead Space doesn't do that. And
I wonder what the in-lore reason would be, and why they become the way that they have. So every cell in this thing wants you dead. It's not necessarily like a parasite then. It just changes the cells in your body on a molecular level to become this necromorph? Why are there so many different variations when it comes to these mutations? Based off of their appearance, I'm assuming something happened to the crew, right? If we're going off of sci-fi tropes, perhaps we uncovered some ancient alien technology. We wanted to research it because as humans, we're incredibly curious and want to learn about the alien tech. But then something started happening to everybody and people started noticing weird things and then all hell broke loose. Maybe? Or maybe we are going down the route of parasitic creature that we discovered and we try to research, ends up infesting itself into somebody, and then it spreads out from there.
I actually kind of hate how they introduce it to the player. This is right above your first weapon. Not exactly subtle. I definitely can't miss the big window telling me to cut off the limbs. Okay, I got it.
Listen, forget about shooting them in the body. You gotta cut off the limbs. Grab a cutter, anything like that. Cut them apart.
Okay, 3 times the charm. Now let's find the neck.
Be careful. Shooting them in the body didn't seem to work. Go for the limbs. Dismember them. That should do the job.
I understand. Everyone's telling me.
Dismembering enemy limbs.
Oh, come on.
Oh my god. What the fuck? Why is it like back to back to back to back? Jesus. Alright, there is something to be said about how this aspect was probably playtested, and there may have been certain players who didn't get the memo despite all of the signs pointing to it. I can see that being a concern, which is why you'd want to re-emphasize things. But on the other hand, it's a bit hand-holdy. In that aspect, how much is too much? I know people who appreciate the fact that there's yellow paint on climbable ledges, because sometimes you just can't tell. And I know a bunch of people who absolutely hate it, because it's pretty obvious where the climbing ledges are.
Come on. I get they didn't want players to miss out on this, but this is all within about 3 minutes. That's 5 prompts in a row. You've only fought about 2 enemies by this point. It's unnecessarily heavy-handed, and that's going to be a theme here. It's an action horror game, so I'm going to take a look at the action first. It's pretty damn solid. As the engineer, your main task is to get the ship working again. The necromorphs aren't making this easy, but you have some weapons to dispose of them. Instead of guns, most of your weaponry is mining equipment, but this is dangerous, future space mining equipment. They had an arm factory after all. When gravity-tethered buzzsaws are part of your equipment, it makes sense to have an arm factory. The 7 weapons in the game each feel very different, and all have a multitude of roles you can use them for.
I think having them being mining tools really sets the game apart. It makes sense for the character, it also fits aesthetically, and you already have an in-lore reason as to why you go about the ship and you probably procure a ton of new weapons. Because, yeah, they're mining tools. Of course they'd be here. It's not like turn around the corner and you find the shotgun, you know? Which honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was on this ship. You could find them in some sort of security room. But how many games have done that already? We're in space on a mining ship. Let's get creative.
You can carry 4 at a time, so that leaves a lot of room to experiment. It's all about preference. The one gun in the game, the pulse rifle, needs a lot of ammo for these little enemies. There could be a better way. Or even better than that. Each weapon also has an alternate fire mode, so depending on what you're carrying, it can feel like having 8 weapons. The variety in weapons is perfect for matching all the different enemies. If something is giving you trouble, maybe some new hardware will do the trick. This is a bad mindset to have in real life, but here, it's good. It's neat to think about the practical uses of these tools, before they're being used to slaughter monsters. The pulse rifle does raise some questions.
Whoa, what is that for?
It's possible to just beat the game with a plasma cutter, though you'd be missing out all the fun and the variety. See, I got that, bad man.
Oh
Besides
god!
conventional weapons, you have some other tools. You have a stasis module that'll temporarily slow enemies down. This is useful for getting out of a tight spot. You especially need it for dealing with level hazards. Pretty handy. There's also a gravity manipulating.
Oh my god. Breath of the Wild moment right there. Just put that in stasis. We even have the magnetism here. I'm actually rather curious what the first game was that started playing around with these sort of mechanics. It was probably pretty early on in gaming history.
Kinesis module, also used for dealing with level hazards. It also manipulates small objects, so you can throw some explosive barrels at necromorphs. This is effective, and it doesn't waste any ammo. Or throw explosive enemy parts at other enemies. Throw their own blades at them. Throw blades you find on the ground at them.
That's
Why
awesome.
reach for anything anymore? This is your life now. You can find health packs, ammo, and money by searching around the ship. Most ammo you find is based on what weapons you're carrying. This way your loadout won't affect your salvage rates. You always need to be on the hunt for the boxes and lockers. They're your lifeblood.
Nice.
This is another bonus for the breadcrumb system. You always know which way you need to go, so you can go another way. There's no worrying about which way is the right way and which way is the explorer's way. The game tells you. On top of that, it only tells you if you
Perfect.
ask for it. If you don't want direct
Not gonna lie, I've had so many moments when I'm playing something like Trails in the Sky, and I want to go and explore the entire dungeon, but I end up accidentally going the right way the first time and then get into the cutscene and get into the boss fight. Well, my bad for guessing incorrectly. Maybe I just don't have any gamer sense.
directional help, the game never gives it to you. Looking for health and ammo is a given, but there are a few other things to keep an eye out for. Every once in a while, you might find a new item, weapon, or armor schematic. These items can be brought to a store. Once it's there, you can buy the items. Then you go on the hunt for the money, or valuable items you can sell for the money. Anything you find can be sold. No trip is wasted. A better suit means more damage resistance and more inventory space. It always feels like a major accomplishment when you get some new threads. It's a progression milestone. You can make smaller ones along the way. Scattered through the levels or on tough enemies are power nodes. There's also an option to buy them at the store, but at 10k a pop they're expensive. If you find a workbench, all of your weapons, your suit powers, and the suit itself can be upgraded. The items are upgraded with a circuit system, so you might need 3 power nodes just to get the first upgrade. So making your health bar bigger would cost 3 power nodes, but if you improve a weapon it might cost less power nodes to get upgrades. A capacity upgrade fills your weapon with ammo, so it might be a good idea to wait until your ammo is low before upgrading your capacity. That's saving some money. I think it's a
I
good
see.
system because you can't just rush something like a damage upgrade. You have to think about it a bit. As an added bonus, it's not just numbers. When your weapon's upgraded, you get new visual and sound effects. There's also the option to
It is slightly different. I definitely think it's another important aspect of the progression system, which unfortunately a lot of games even nowadays fall into the pit hole of bigger number equals better. Our player will be happy with bigger number. Not necessarily. Changing things aesthetically or seeing the actual progress visually is much preferable, at least in my opinion. When talking about this topic, I always think of a particular robot you can buy and sell items to in Nier Automata, and I think that robot wants to build like a tower to the moon or something along those lines. It seems just like some funny side thing to do. But what really surprised me was the fact that the more items you bought from them, you could actually see in the background of that area a tower slowly building up towards the moon. And I just thought that was pretty neat. And it made that interaction with that particular NPC shop a lot more memorable.
spend a power node to open a power lock door, and these have all been worth it from my experience. These systems altogether are excellent, but they work their best on harder difficulties. On easier difficulties, enemies drop more ammo and are more likely to drop ammo, they take less hits to kill, they dish out less damage and rarely dodge your attacks. All these systems work together because of scarcity. If someone's playing on easy, they can kill the enemies in a few hits, they have more ammo, which means they can sell it for more money, and they have more upgrades. You don't need to scavenge as much, you always have stuff on you.
Oh,
It
that's
completely
cool.
dissolves all the tension. As much as I love the game, it has a commitment problem. So now I need to talk about the horror aspect of Dead Space. It's not as strong as the action. Really good works of horror take a long time to build up tension. Dead Space has about 2 minutes.
I don't know. Something's in the room with us.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, that's a pretty big issue too. The monster design is cool, But really good horror movies never reveal the monster until the very end. The moment you do, it sort of releases the tension away completely. I don't really think there's a way around this though, because this is like a horror action shooter. So you kind of have to see what you're shooting at. And on the other side of the argument, maybe having a longer build-up might have been more impactful on the horror side of things, but maybe you have already lost your player's interest by then. I'm very curious to see how the writing is for Dead Space, and if the narrative itself is enough to hold the attention of the player. From all the items that we've seen so far, I honestly would probably stick around just for the world building. But another factor that I often forget to consider is the year when this was released and like what current trends were. Perhaps people at the time just maybe weren't as invested in stories like this because there were a bunch of other stories in a similar fashion being released at the same time. And I mean, heck, from the developer side of things, I don't think they knew this was going to be like as legendary of a series as it has become. In fact, I don't think anybody ever knows that something that they make is going to immediately pop off.
I do like this sequence, but it's very apparent this isn't going to be a very subtle game. Listen to how much is going on.
Oh, jeez.
Run, Isaac! Get the hell out of there!
I can barely hear myself think.
Get out of here.
The game feels so tense during the quiet parts. The problem is when the game does build up to something, it has to be as loud and over the top as possible. It's also very reliant on jump scares. The first time that I shot an enemy and it played dead, it caught me off guard, but I figured it out quick. I get that horror is subjective and something that scares me might not scare someone else. The issue here is using the same tricks over and over again. That looks kind of suspicious. Yeah, he was just faking it. There's another one. Okay, this one has a spotlight on it, so let's check that out. Wow, they're really focusing on this one. Even if these things terrify you, you're gonna figure them out quick. Even that sequence in the beginning kind of lost its magic with me. It wasn't the sequence itself, but the game kept showing scary things behind glass.
Let me out!
What the frick?
Don't wait for me! Oh, fuck, you made
And now she awaits her transport.
I'm gonna assume this was more so a technological limitation, and really more so a convenient thing. Heck, I'm sure even modern horror games, I would assume there are scenes like this in Alien Isolation. It just seems natural to do. You show the player a possible threat that they'll face in the future in a relatively safe area so that they can assess what they're going to do against this new enemy. I think it makes sense on paper, but it's not overly exciting.
Howdy. I'm not even gonna test this one. A lot of the Ishimura is very tight hallways, so what happens is you'll be going down chasing an enemy, and then they'll spawn one behind you. I'm not gonna make a montage of those because it's so constant, but basically whenever you fight, look over your shoulder, there's probably something there.
This is Benson. Everybody listen up. They're using the vents. That's how they're getting around the ship.
They're gonna be popping out of vents a lot. Bursting out of a vent is their main method of spawning for the whole game. I know the phrase "don't let them see the monster" won't work in Dead Space, but another method does. I get that the necromorphs are mainly based off of the alien in the movie The Thing, but there's some key differences in execution. Both necromorphs...
I was gonna say earlier, when that necromorph split apart into multiple different little things, it did remind me of The Thing. Although I'm not sure which one came first. Actually, no. I am fairly certain The Thing came first. Just considering the time frame, yeah, no way, right? Also, wasn't there like a new game based off of The Thing? And The Thing recently released in Marvel Rivals, too. Coincidence? I think not.
And The Thing are grotesque alien monsters. Both of them appear completely in the light. But what made The Thing scary is that it was unpredictable. It had multiple forms it could take and methods of getting around. The Thing didn't burst out of the broom closet every time it appeared. Dead Space is fully capable of making this work. It does it a few times.
That's pretty damn cool.
While it has all the issues I listed before, there's this one level I really like. It's all a build up to a boss fight. There are some necromorphs in this level you don't see anywhere else in the game. The area is tinted differently and looks like nothing else in the ship. There's a long, quiet walk to it. You've only heard about this thing through audio logs and text, and you have no idea what to expect. I'm not going to show it, but it's a fantastic build up to the fight. It makes me wish that more of the game was like this. What if the beginning was different? How about the glass scene never happens, the lobby is empty, and the team splits up? The player learns how to use the kinesis and stasis modules to move around the environment. There's no blood or writing on the walls, it's just kind of quiet and creepy. Where is everybody? They recall you back to the lobby and you're just walking down the hallway.
What the fuck was that?
What the hell was that?
Yeah, right? Man, that would be so good. Although, I suppose you could also say that a lot of horror movies do the same thing, but they do the same thing because it works. Honestly, imagining that scenario in my head makes it quite appealing. Not gonna lie. Now I'm even more curious to see how they introduce the alien in Alien Isolation. I didn't play the game. We were going to for Halloween, but whatever scheduling reason, we changed the game to something else. I forget, it's been a while, but maybe they did something similar to that.
Wouldn't have to be long. You could go to the lobby and replay the glass scene like normal, but maybe a little bit of build-up would be nice. I felt more tense when the Necromorphs weren't attacking me.
Oh.
That's spooky. The combat is really fun and tense, I just wish some elements weren't so repetitive. The fact that you go back to levels several times makes this even more detrimental. It seems like the game can be edited down a bit and not lose much. Quiet Dead Space and loud Dead Space feel like two completely different games. It kind of is in a way. I read an article that explains a lot. When Resident Evil 4 came out, it was, no pun intended, a game changer. The offset over-the-shoulder camera would go on to influence a ton of games. So you have a horror title relying more on action elements that becomes wildly successful. When this happened in 2005, the Dead Space team was the System Shock 3 team. The team was so impressed by it, they decided to make their own Resident Evil 4, but put it—
Huh? Excuse me? Is this why we don't have the System Shock 3? Are you kidding me?
Put it in space. I'm not exaggerating that. There was a lot of clunkiness in 4 they wanted to improve on, but it's safe to say without Resident Evil 4, there would be no Dead Space. The setting of Dead Space and the concept are very similar to System Shock, so that all makes sense. It's really not a hard stretch to make if you've played both games. System Shock is much slower than Resident Evil 4. I can't even say that I think one game is better because they're so different in how they're presented. This completely explains why I find some parts of Dead Space to be really jarring. It's like one moment it's quiet, tense, and slow building, and then bam, you're in Resident Evil 4 mode. There were a few parts where I felt like I could see it happening in real time. Like Necromorphs would just be quietly stalking around with no music, then one sees you and it all shifts.
Oh.
There is a saving grace to this. If you can accept Dead Space as a haunted house ride, it's a ton of fun, because when they go over the top, they don't hold back. You can find montages that are only scenes of Isaac dying, because they're just so well made.
Man, when there are montages of that on YouTube, you know that he did some really good death animations. I actually kind of prefer the quieter side of things. That's mostly how it always was during the entirety of my Soma playthrough. It was more so a massive buildup of dread and really tough existential decisions to make. So you could say that's sort of my preference, so I'm a bit biased here. But there's just something so satisfying about both Thief and System Shock that you don't really get in the action-heavy Resident Evil games. I never played them, but I did watch playthroughs of both Resident Evil 7 and 8. I think 8 is Village, right? Between the two of them, I much preferred 7. Like, 7's atmosphere was awesome, whereas 8 sort of went back to its action roots, and I know a lot of people really enjoyed that, but yeah, it's just never really been for me. Regardless, I can still see this being quite an enjoyable experience, as Mandalore said, treat it as a haunted house. Just be, like, excited to see what's around the next corner. And if they were gonna go with the action, of course they had to go, like, over the top. If you don't fully commit, then don't even try. Or else you're just gonna end up with a half-assed result that nobody really likes. Bye. Oh god. It's not over. Ooh. And then does it take over our body like that? What the frick? Oh god! Is that what happened to everybody else too?
Yeah, there's no coming back from that. I guess my point is that there were a lot of ways they could have made it scarier, but they didn't. At the same—
Oh my god. There's an asteroid shooting minigame. Oh, I have Bro, I just went through some PTSD flashbacks to Knights of the Old Republic. Oh, that minigame was so hard to control. I hated it so much. Oh. But I guess it's a space game. You kind of have to have it, right? At some point. It's iconic. Yeah.
Same time, I don't think it's a huge issue because the game's fun and that's what it's all about. Don't play to be scared, play for a good time. You can still pretend to be scared on Twitch. I also found the space part of Dead Space.
That's the way to get viewers, man. I'd like to think I'm not a very jumpy person. Like, when I'm playing watching other people play the FNAF games, none of it bothers me at all. I don't really see the appeal of it personally. But hot diggity dog, when I was playing Soma, I was so tense. Every single corner had something dangerous behind it, even though there weren't really a lot of enemies. And the game was quite forgiving, actually, when it came to those sort of encounters. Once again, it's all about that build-up and atmosphere. That really does it for me. And not gonna lie, I kind of wish I could pretend like that. Maybe it would make these reactions more interesting.
Space to be a bit of a letdown. You leap around from surface to surface with magnetic boots, and you can't fly around in 0G. The camera can also flip out a bit during this. It's not.
The magnetic boots sort of remind me of a particular section in Twilight Princess. It's one of the only Zelda games I actually played personally. From what I recall, I didn't really like it very much. It just took like a long time and seemed kind of tedious.
Not horrible, but vastly improved in the sequel. As for the story, the character parts are kind of weak. Isaac is also trying to find his girlfriend on the ship, but he's a silent protagonist. I mean, technically he has some journal commentary, but I was way more invested in the mystery. I'm gonna talk spoilers, so go to here if you don't want to see those.
Gotcha.
Are they gone?
Oh well, we're not really here for the characters, are we? I've been wondering this entire video, like, how did the necromorphs come to be? What the hell happened? What did we find? It has to be like the alien artifact route, right? Because we're on a mining ship too, it just makes sense.
Thank God.
We have to assume that the colony's problems are somehow connected to the marker.
You can assume all you want to. I do not. The marker is glorious and divine.
Yeah, alien artifact.
As you progress, it becomes apparent that this wasn't a normal mining operation. Something was very off. Even before the necromorphs showed up, the crew on the ship and the crew down the planet were suffering mental illnesses and other, red flags. As bad as things were getting, the captain...
That's one way to put it. We did see scenes before where Isaac was walking through a room with a bunch of dead bodies and a bunch of candles around. It seemed very ritualistic. So maybe this marker thing started affecting their minds, and there were cults formed around it, and perhaps those cults went a little bit rogue and somehow activated something from the marker that turned people into necromorphs, or released something from within the marker.
Wouldn't call it an SOS, because it was an illegal mining operation. But they didn't even call for help when the necromorphs were all over the place. Yeah, this is a really shady company, but they're not that shady. If something like this is growing on your wall, I think you need to make a few phone calls. Strangely enough, the military just happens to be in the neighborhood. So what's going on here? Dead Space has a powerful religion called Unitology. They believe life on Earth was seeded by aliens. They claim an alien artifact called the Marker was discovered on Earth, but the government covered it up. Well, you'll never guess what they found on the planet. A fresh, new Crayola red marker. Its discovery driving people insane or turning them into monsters is a bit of a test of faith for the crew. Not all of them are Unitologists, after all. The ones who are feel conflicted about it. Is it supposed to work this way? Is something going wrong? Or is this always how it was meant to be?
I think your religion may have a few flaws in it. Now that is a sentence that you say when you want to start a war with somebody. But then, if the marker is doing that to all these people because they're being exposed to it, why is it not happening to Isaac? Does it just take a lot of time? Can you hang around the markers for a little bit and still be fine? Or does it affect particular individuals? Does Isaac have some sort of resistance to it because he's the main character? Maybe the mining suit is protecting him. Lots of questions.
So naturally you get some power struggles. It's nice you could put a lot of this together on your own before the game outright tells you. I'm usually not a fan of scary graffiti, but if you want to be a serial box translator, you can figure out some elements early. I do like that being an option. But then the twist happens. The captain was sent there to retrieve the marker. The church and the company have pretty close ties, and so when a survey team found it, they rang the church rang the captain. The last captain just didn't have what it took, but then, triple twist. One of the repair crew members is a covert agent. The marker on the planet is actually an artificial copy of the real marker. The government tested it on some barren wasteland world where no one would bother them. When it turned out to have issues, they made the zone off limits and buried it. The scientists altered the marker so that it would contain the necromorphs. That way the other undead scientists would be trapped there. But your crewmate wants to bring it back to the government and leave you to die. Some of these beats are kind of familiar. Oh right,
yeah.
You do find out earlier that your girlfriend is alive. There's something suspicious about it, but I can't put my finger on it. Alright, she's been dead the whole time. As much as I think the character elements are weak, I do like this one little moment here. It's not much, he's still silent, but hey, it's something.
The classic character animation of putting your hand over your head and be sad. So does that mean that she sort of haunts his memories? Is this going to be a recurring thing throughout the rest of the games too?
Isaac tries to return the marker, but things don't go as planned. The whole game built up to this, and it's worth it.
Giant necromorph. What the frick? How am I supposed to deal with that?
It was so worth it to be here. This thing is amazing.
Shoot the yellow
the
glowy
things
things.
Isn't the most challenging fight, but as far as the final boss goes, it's pretty incredible. Compared to everything else in Dead Space, the hive mind is on a completely new level of spectacle. You made it through everything else, now your reward is getting to fight the giant monster. You escape the planet, get a jump scare, and that's Dead Space. Despite it having a lot of cliches, I enjoy the story of Dead Space.
I see. So yeah, he will forever be haunted by the memory of his dead GF. Not gonna lie, I'm kind of hoping that the next Dead Space games expand upon Isaac's character. That seems like the natural progression, considering, well, if this game did well, then they would want to expand more upon the world and the characters. We're already sort of attached to him, so give us more.
It's a very satisfying game. It answers questions, but not all of them. What exactly are the markers? Who built them? What's their purpose?
Nobody knows.
Why does it make necromorphs? My theory was that it created more of the host race, but something went wrong with the process. After all, it's a copy of the real marker. The necromorphs could be marker DRM. You better not copy this illegally. Who knows? Beating the game unlocks New Game Plus, a new difficulty, and a bunch of goodies for your New Game Plus. It's time to win the war.
Nice.
Despite its flaws, Dead Space is a solid game, and I highly recommend it. Just remember to tweak your settings a bit. Next time I'll be going over a game that I think is better than this one. I'll see you next time when Wait, I forgot to mention a secret. Dead Space has 12 named chapters. If you put together the first letter of each chapter, you get a secret message. With that out of the way, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
When you put the first letter of every chapter together, you get a secret message. What is the secret message? Sub? Like and subscribe? I think Mandalore is trolling me. Oh my god. It actually... God damn it, Mandalore. Man, I thought it was reading it wrong. No. No, you're just trolling me. So that was Dead Space. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. Nothing, like, completely mind-blowing happened here, but it does seem like a whole lot of fun. Similarly to how I felt with the first System Shock game, I can see a lot of potential here, and there were a lot of really cool and fun ideas that were implemented. We just need a little more polishing. Hopefully we get that with the sequels, and it's not like a lot of other series where the sequels sort of taper off and everybody just praises the original because it's the best. It's just so frustrating, you know, when you see something with a lot of potential that never really gets realized. But yeah, dudes, that's gonna be it from me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.